Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Payson. Welcome back for everyone who is already a subscriber to the show. If you're not already a subscriber to the show, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now. Always an honor to have a first-time guest on the show. This first-time guest on the show has an amateur MMA record of 3 wins and no losses, coming off an impressive second-round stoppage win by submission at 247 Fighting Championships, 247 MMA at the venue live just a few days ago is the one, the only Forrest Cressley. Forrest, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
It is great to have you on. Truly an honor having a first time guest on the show. I have interviewed you each time you've won for 247. So we have that little moment inside the cage, but it just hasn't worked for us to get you officially set up. And then one of your REAKT, I was going to say MMA, but I think the title's different. The REAKT Gym, we'll say. The REAKT Gym, one of your REAKT Gym members, hats off to him, gave me your cell phone number so that we could be in touch. So welcome to the show. We're going to pause talking about your impressive win over Kyle Gissinger here for a second. We're going to start back before MMA. What was your middle school, high school, maybe college athletics? What type of background did you have? And then how did that lead to MMA?
So I wrestled from when I was, in early elementary school, maybe like 5 years old or something like that, up until my freshman year. I blew out my knee my 7th grade year, and I did it again my freshman year. So I decided enough, and I did it both times in wrestling. So I just kind of wrote it off, and I was like, I want to continue doing football, and was sick of getting injured, but I wish I would have stuck with it. But then after high school, I missed competing, so I was like looking for stuff that I could do, and especially like all year round, just keep into everything. So I wanted to get into some sort of combat sport, was looking at some different boxing gyms in the area, and then I found REAKT, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. A little bit of ground game with the jiu-jitsu, and then I seen they had a striking program. I was like, oh, that'll be right up my alley. And Lance is awesome, welcomed me right in. And I think when I first went there, he's like, oh, you got like a couple free trial classes. But I was like, just sign me up. And I'm like, I already love it. Just put me on the membership.
Well, that is great. We had just had, it's a great interview. People need to go watch it. Your teammate Eric, I'm calling him Eric Benny Bennington, just because it's fun to say it that way. But Eric, he doesn't officially have a fight nickname, just like you don't have one either. Eric Bennington talked about like moving to the area, buying a farm, and literally had to deal with his wife. It's a hilarious story. If you haven't listened to it, you might already know it. One of the criteria with his wife is that he had to be within like a half hour or some distance to a MMA gym, and then obviously found REAKT and called them up and was asking them questions before he put money down on his house to make sure it was a good gym. I'm guessing you were already up and training before he joined because you've been doing. How long between finding REAKT did you take your first fight, which your debut fight was for 247 Fighting Championship, which was back in March, not even a year ago, March of 2025. So how long before your debut were you training at REAKT?
It was a little under 2 years. A little under 2 years. I got to the point where I really wanted to know everything that I've been working on, and felt like I was ready to step in the cage, and all my coaches agreed. So
Well, you have absolutely shown that you were ready. You have fought twice for 247 and then one other time outside of 247, all within a year, which is pretty good. 3 times in a year. 2 of those wins have been by stoppage. Both in 247 have been by stoppage. Your debut against Brandon Cherry was by rear naked choke. Then you had a split decision win outside of 247 back in June. And then you just won by submission a few days ago. Talk about kind of the takeaways, the experience of your debut almost a year ago, March 15th of 2025. I'm sure we could do a whole interview just on that, but kind of what's the overview of the fight, the win? You won in round one. It wasn't super long of a fight. So kind of what has that been like, and then building on your 2 others?
the whole experience was awesome. Like everybody always asks, like, what's it feel like to get in there? And it unless you do it, it's really hard to explain. Like there's so many emotions, the adrenaline's high, like you got your coaches and everybody watching you at home or there, like at tickets. And it's such a great feeling, especially getting your hand raised and showing that all the hard work you put in pays off.
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. That's one of the reasons why I do this show to hear directly from fighters. And you know, you from March, which was a great win. I remember it when you from March till now, you're now 3-0, and something that's very exciting that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more. I guess we can talk about now is at 3-0, you now officially in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania can fight advanced amateurs. And even though this might seem a bit odd because we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, there are three levels of MMA rules in Pennsylvania. Novice, which you just did, which is three 2-minute rounds and fairly restricted on what you can do. And then advanced amateur, which is literally you could fight advanced amateur for 20 fights, right? Until you're pro, you're advanced amateur, which in Pennsylvania is three 3-minute rounds, so 9-minute total fight. Strikes to the head on the ground, no elbows, no knees, and still I believe no head kicks. So the striking is still limited, but a lot more of what you can do on the ground looks more like a pro fight. Also looks more like a pro fight because of no shin pads. And I know that kind of sounds funny, but a lot of fans when they see shin pads, they know it's amateur, and advanced amateur has just a different feel to it. Plus, you have to have at least a 2-1 record or a 3-0. You have to have three fights. Every once in a while, I've heard a case made for somebody who's 2-0, like you were 2-0, but like, hey, technically they should be able to fight advanced amateur, but typically the commissioner doesn't see it that way, and so like you still needed to fight against Kyle at novice. Now that you're 3-0, are you very much looking forward to advanced amateur, and what are you looking forward to about it in the future? As far as is it rule set? Is it longer rounds? Like what are you looking forward to?
So actually, my second fight when we were down in Delaware, their rule set was different. So it was kind of
Is
advanced amateur. We still had the shin pads, but they were 3 3-minute rounds and ground and pound, which was nice, especially like coming from a grappling gym. Like I spent a lot of time on the ground and the ground and pound in my second fight, so that was nice. But it definitely doing this fight, I had to think a little bit on my feet to not make a mistake and hit him to the head on the ground or anything like that. But yeah, definitely looking forward to the ground and pound. The shin pads, I could kind of care less either way. It's is what it is. But the ground and pound will be nice. The 3 3-minute rounds get you a little bit more time to work for a submission.
sure.
Just figure it out on the feet, you know.
Well, and your December, sorry, your Delaware fight in June went to a decision, which meant you did fight for all 9 minutes. Which, what's funny is your submissions for 247 have been quick, have been less than a 6-minute fight total, two fights combined. So confidence wise, you've had more cage time because of the Delaware fight, because of the rule set longer fight. And what did that bank, the endurance bank, the confidence of knowing that you had just done 9 minutes, how did that help your confidence coming into the Kyle fight? Kyle Geisinger, you ended up not needing it. You finished in the second round, but did it feel good to have known that you could fight all the way to a decision? Ended up being, I believe, a split decision win, which meant it wasn't the easiest thing, which is probably good. It gives you a tough outing. What was that mindset like coming in to the fight just a few days ago, January 31st, 247 MMA at the venue for?
So the guy that I fought down in Delaware, he's a very high level kickboxer. So it and especially like fighting the whole fight through it let me know that I could stand there and strike with somebody really good. Like I still have the gas tank to keep pushing through all the rounds and still come out on top facing a high level guy like that. Like I believe he was want to say 11-4 was his kickboxing record. So
Holy cow. Yeah.
yeah, they
Yeah.
actually I don't know if it was confusion or somebody something, but they told me he was 3-2 when I first took it. But oh well.
Yeah. One of the things was that Brad Dalton's promotion?
Yep.
Yeah, great guy. Hats off to Brad Dalton. Years ago, when I was running Pursuit MMA, which was a Christian MMA gym in Norristown, Pennsylvania, we got down there to the Delaware Fairgrounds. I think is where he still probably hosts it, maybe.
Yep, that's where we were at.
Yeah, and Brad Dalton, great guy. And what because I don't fully know how those numbers change. But what I do know is that unlike, and I have to say it's very nice, unlike Tapology and the official reporting of MMA, they've tried to get better, but kickboxing, Muay Thai, those type, every once in a while you'll see kickboxing and Muay Thai show up on Tapology, which I think is good because it kind of, and they'll say a grappling or, they'll put it in parentheses, which I think is good. But it is possible to have like a ridiculously good kickboxing record or potentially also a ridiculously good naga, which is like a grappling submission. You
Yep.
could be a four-time naga world champion and it would never show up on Tapology. So there are aspects that make matching a little bit tough. I also have to say the the ability for you to like physically and mentally adjust to a guy, hats off to your opponent being such a stud striking on the feet, but clearly that took you to deeper waters and was more of a that's probably more of like a low level pro fight with a guy with that much background, because if you were 11-4 in amateur MMA, you're pretty much guaranteed to be a pro, but
Yeah.
obviously MMA is diverse. There's so much that can happen in MMA. Think of the MMA fighters that have to get matched up against a three-time Division I national champion, right? Which we've seen happen with Bo Nickel went, and
Yep.
there's sometimes you got to get thrown into MMA until you get it figured out. What stood out in your fight versus Kyle in the first round? We'll talk about the second round when you got the finish. What do you remember about the first round in that matchup?
So obviously he was very long. So it took me a little bit to figure out his range and where I could find holes in his game to get in and land strikes, which I did towards the end of the round and ended up dropping him twice, which was definitely a big confidence boost going into round two, knowing that I could strike with him, but then also go to the ground if I needed. So
Yeah, I remember that towards the end when you had dropped him twice in a pure like USA boxing rule set, which it's not. MMA again, rule set's different, but like in a pure USA boxing, after two knockdowns, if there's three, the fight's automatically called off. That's not the case in MMA. And when rounds go longer, like 5-minute pro rounds, we've seen it where, it particularly because grappling allows people to recover, right? Like somebody could get dropped three times in a round, four times in a round. And as long as they're still, protecting themselves and not unconscious or not able to, fight back, the fight will keep going. I think, and it wasn't, most of them were takedowns, but I think of the Chael Sonnen several years ago, Chael Sonnen versus Spider Silva, like it was obviously going Chael Sonnen's every round was going his way until the last 2 minutes with the submission off his back triangle. They weren't knockdowns, they were takedowns. That's a slightly different thing. Coming off the stool, what was the game plan? Was it to continue to bang? Was it to take it down and look for a submission, which ended up happening? But like what was the game plan coming off the stool?
so I was feeling good striking. Like I wasn't gonna push for the ground, but I mean, obviously he took a shot and we ended up going to the ground, but I wasn't going to make the push for the ground. Maybe when round three came around and, if I didn't have quite good round two as I was hoping, then maybe we were going to go to the ground and go for submission. But no, coming off the stool, I wanted to stand and throw some hands. I actually, the one time when he was like an open guard, I guess you could say, I think I was going in for a couple shots and then I backed out and I actually like
Yeah.
finger waved to get up because I was like, I was having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And in MMA, when you wave somebody up, which Chip does an incredible job, Chip Snyder, hats off to him. Uh, but yeah, I remember you waving him up. Chip jumps in, make sure because you can't like fake somebody into that when they start to get up and then attack them. So like, and obviously you did, you backed off, and he was able to get back up. What's great about MMA is the reactionary, right? You had to be able to react. His takedown ended up you kind of reversing it and getting on top. But I think that's what makes MMA so dynamic is there's what you plan to happen, but then there's also sort of just reaction. At what point, because you did what I really enjoy from side control and also mount. You were kind of, moving, but like from side control mount, you were setting up a lot of, some people call it the arm triangle. I like to call it the side triangle choke, the arm, head and arm triangle choke,
Yep.
whatever term you'd use. It's one of my favorite. You set it up, I don't know, 4 times maybe, different attacks. Um, how much is that kind of part of your chain submission? You ended up winning by a different submission, which we'll get to, but it clearly made him uncomfortable. He had to react to it. You showed a lot of poise. People sometimes don't realize that you can kind of over squeeze it if it's not right, and you kept kind of adjusting it, and then eventually his defense of that let an arm loose that that you were able to slap on a different. I used to teach the arm triangle choke to set up the key lock or the Americana because people come over to protect, to create like to create space, and then you have the arm, or even the answer the phone defense, which is a decent defense at times if you can keep your arm down underneath the head. You can also change that as well. So, what were your thoughts when you were chaining together, and when did you decide to switch off from the head arm triangle choke to the key lock slash Americana?
So the majority of the submissions I go for, I guess, are like more pressure based. Like I'm not trying to hit triangles off my back as much. I guess just also my style of grappling is a little bit more pressure based. So I like side control. I feel comfortable there. Sometimes, depending on the opponent, I honestly feel more comfortable there than mount. Um, but yeah, so just we did a lot of like head and arms recently, so it's just been something I was liking,
Yeah.
and I just happened to see his arm right there for the Americana and snagged it up.
Yeah, and I had a great view of it, and I understand, and I think Kyle's a great competitor. And people will say, I remember even being taught it and teaching it that like, oh, Americana's a beginner submission, and it's not really going to work against higher level guys or in a real fight. The reality is, any submission fully locked in, doesn't matter how dumb or bad or low percentage. There are lower percentage submissions. Once it's fully locked in, and I think hats off to you, and Kyle is a great competitor, but you would put so much work in with the head and arm triangles and some of the other stuff, and piece, and putting work. I remember he was kind of bleeding, and so there was a lot going on from the striking. And by the time he probably realized that it was locked on, it was too late. And it's a nasty lock. You did a great job. You also did a great job. I used to tell people it's like a paintbrush. You have to like paint the brush of their knuckles because it's not like you don't just hold it. You have to like move it. And you did a great job with that. Obviously, he ended up tapping. You pretty much have to. I mean, your shoulder's worth way more than trying to win an MMA fight. What was your confidence level when you put it on? Um, and kind of like how long, hypothetically, how long would you have worked at it before switching to something else if theoretically it hadn't worked? I know that's a weird question, but I think that's part of the chain wrestling or chain grappling is to know, okay, I'm going to adjust this and work this, but there's another move you could go to. Just curious.
So I probably would have kept because I knew there was pretty short time left. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
probably would have kept a hold of it and just
Finish.
get
Yeah,
it the rest of the time. As far as like finishing it goes, I was trying to bully it a little bit because, like I said, I know there was a little bit of short time left. Like I think when I had it locked up, sub 15 seconds or so,
yeah,
maybe. Um, and I know like earlier when we were in side control, he was kipping pretty hard trying to get out. So that's why I kind of slid the knee in for knee on belly to try to, not have him squirm out. And then right at the end of the round, there's not much else that I can go for there. So I really tried to put a lot in on that finish. And then, even if like I didn't get it, at least he had to waste energy trying to fight it and get out of it, so set me up good for the following round.
yeah. That's a great answer. You ended up getting the finish, and it shows a lot of good fight awareness, like where you are in the time, what you would do next. And that's why I try to ask those questions as a coach, like because you got to be in the moment, but you also have to kind of have an idea because too often in MMA, fighters get so locked in that they burn their arms off. in a guillotine that wasn't really that deep, and then those 25 or 30 seconds, they're like, oh my goodness, like now I'm screwed. You got it. You actually got the tap 8 seconds to go, so you're probably right. It was about 15 when you put it on. Obviously, had he not tapped, it would have still been a very dominant way to finish the round. You have won twice by submission and both by submission with a tap out. What does it feel like to get that finish where it's a clear cut? You were coming off a split decision win, which was great, but also a lot more nerve wracking. What
Yep.
does it feel like to, like, it's over? There was no argument, and obviously you stopped as soon as he tapped. But what is that feeling like versus waiting for a decision?
I mean, it's great. Like you knew that like you're the winner. Like
Yeah,
there's no
yeah, it's over. Yep.
yeah, it's over. Like there's no second guessing. Like it's not in the judges' hands. Like they can't like if they're a little skewed one way because of something or the other, like it's pretty cut and dry. Like you were the winner there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's a big part of getting a finish. And I do know that they still collect because I'm there, and I know that I think they just like to collect them to see, but the commissioner still collects we don't see them, but the commissioner still collects the judges' scorecards,
Mm.
even though it obviously finished in a submission because somewhere the commissioner hangs on to whatever the first round scored was, which was at least a 10-9 because you had, but with two knockdowns, if it's a pure boxing score, every knockdown they kind of take a point. I in MMA they rarely do that. It could have been a 10-8. If I was scoring it as a judge, I probably would have had it at 10-8 because you were winning it 10-9 and then with two knockdowns. But you obviously you were in good command. You were in good command of the fight. I've known Kyle. I've interviewed Kyle. I want him to obviously bounce back and have a great fight next. When we think about great fights next, we were talking about how you're going to hopefully have an advanced amateur fight next. What are you kind of wanting out of yourself in an advanced amateur fight in Pennsylvania, having one similar in Delaware, and kind of what timetable are you looking for, given the fact that you are next month, you'll be one entire year of as far as competing goes.
So I know 247s have a card in March. I would not mind getting on that. Either way, I'm going to compete, whether it's grappling or MMA in March. But I would really like to get another MMA fight in March. And I want a good opponent, you know, like I want to be able to like really test my skills. Like I'd rather lose to a good opponent
Yep.
than, somebody that's not on my level because I'm not going to be
Yep.
progressing at the end of it all. I'm not going to be learning what I need to be.
That is the beautiful mindset. I mean, I understand not every fighter is going to have that mindset. That's fine, but it's amateur for a reason, and pushing yourself against people you could potentially lose to. It doesn't mean you want to lose, but people you could potentially lose to is going to push your training, going to push your fighting. You obviously already fought a very tough opponent back in Delaware that if you thought about it too much, and if you knew his record of 11-4, that would have been a bit of a stretch, right? Like that
Yeah.
that feels like a bit of a stretch. But now, to your point, those are the type of fights that you would take. Somebody that has quite a bit of skill because you want to push yourself. I do want to throw out there, I don't have any matchmaking ability. Clearly, 247 does an incredible job. Hunter Homestek, the GM, plus Ryan and whoever else helps him out. But technically, because you fought for 247 March 15th, March 14th is the announced 247 MMA at the Venue 5 card, and it is incredible. We only know, from my public knowledge, we only know two fights, I think. They are both female pro fights, which is insane. Like, that is
Hmm.
great. You might not know the fighters. I know the fighters. I've interviewed them both. I've watched them. They're great fighters. Brittany Bickhart, or they call Brit, or Sunshine, I think is still her nickname.
Yep.
She's incredible. And Cheyenne Back Queen Hall, also incredible. So every card 247 does is a big card, but when you have pro and pro females, it adds a certain level of people will be watching. More people will be coming out to it just because those are very popular Pittsburgh fighters. And I think it'd be great if you're able to get cleared and get matched. You could potentially fight 4 MMA fights within that first 365 days. I mean, that would be pretty cool. So shout out to Hunter and whoever's listening to this as far as potentially you fighting. And I like how you said it's the learner's mindset. It's the training mindset. You're going to be competing in some way soon. We're still over a month away from March 14th. You took, very little damage. And so obviously, if you're safe and healthy, some people don't realize that part of, and I love the fact that the sport is regulated, part of the regulated part of the sport is that fighters get suspensions based on cuts, injuries. It can be all different stuff. Sometimes if a fighter missed weight, that can lead to a suspension just because the commissioner is saying, hey, like if you literally missed what you did, but if you missed by 5 pounds, something's wrong. Might be cutting too much, whatever. So like you never know what suspensions can be. I had a fighter win a fight and got medically suspended because he had taken a hard shot to the head, even though he won. They wanted to get that checked out. So you never know. Sometimes coaches and fighters and sometimes even matchmakers, get frustrated by some of that. But I think those are the things, as annoying as they can sometimes be, and you're not suspended, but as annoying as they can be,
Yeah.
that's why this is a sport, not a street fight, right? Because you need those parameters. You need the parameters of, I happen to be back in the blue corner, the red corner, and if people are curious, this was an all amateur card, no pros, and still the commissioner was randomly urine testing for PEDs and various other things. That doesn't happen for every single person, but it's a professionalism that comes from taking a fight under a commission as opposed to going to. There are still usually on Native American or indigenous people, Indian lands, where you can still sometimes find out west non-regulated fights, but again, you don't have some of those things. So it's been really great. I could talk to you all night with kind of your knowledge of breaking things down. I really appreciate you taking time to come on the show. This has been Luke Payson with the undefeated 3-0, fresh off a win just a few days ago. Forrest Cressley, thanks so much for coming on the show, Forrest.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You got it. You are the man, brother.